What's up, guys? Welcome back to my channel. It's Angel, the Psych MP Vita Mental Demic, and today is going to be a little chit chat with me. The chit chat is mainly coming from, it is being stemmed from me watching people and listening to people, and people just not really being comfortable with telling people how bad their anxiety is, or even kind of acknowledging that they do have anxiety. A friend of mine is actually going through anxiety right now and is literally blaming it on everything but anxiety. And it's like, yo, dude, why can't you accept that you have anxiety? Like, this 2022, like, I think it's like 69% or something like that of people have anxiety. And I'm talking about bad anxiety. Why can't you admit that? Like, what's so hard about admitting that? So he kind of looks up to me a little bit, and I guess he didn't realize how bad my anxiety was when I was going through anxiety. So I was like, you know what? I never really talked about in detail about my anxiety. October 2019. Well, let me go back a little bit before that. I had been in kind of like a tumultuous relationship with somebody that was like very manipulative, lying, cheating, all of those things. And I knew, but I couldn't really put my finger on it. So when you don't really have real proof of something, you kind of just like go with the flow. But inside, it really kind of eats you up because your intuition is there that you know. So that's kind of where I was with this situation. And I was very overwhelmed with it. Very overwhelmed because you love and you care about somebody, and they treating you this way. And you just kind of keep it all in because you just don't know for sure. But your intuition is telling you that, patterns change, things change. That's where I was at. October 2019, my dad passes away. I'm a daddy's girl, very close to my dad. I'm in LA, travel nursing, working on a contract. Get a phone call basically from the hospital that I used to work at when I was first became a nurse, and my dad was actually on that unit that I used to work on. Of course, they remember me and they tell me, hey, your dad just got here. We're going to keep you posted about everything, once we get him settled into the bed or whatever. 20 minutes later, I get a call from the doctor. I'm an ICU nurse myself. When you're getting a call from the doctor, a few things is happening. They want a consent. They wanted to explain the procedure to you, to tell you what's going on. I knew that wasn't the case with my dad because he had literally just got out of surgery, and they transferred him from a lower level of care pre-surgery to a higher level of care after surgery. So I'm like, that ain't why they calling. And the doctor basically was saying that they are doing all that they could do and that they were coding my dad. And I just started screaming because I just kind of knew when the doctor called, like, he's really trying to get me to say that they've been coding him for a while and that they just want me to stop, want to stop. And they wanted to just run it by me because, I used to work on that unit and everything like that. And it's just standard procedure as well when the patient is coding for the doctor to call. But I just felt like they were kind of giving me a courtesy call before they kind of called it. Needless to say, before I can even really give a yes or no, like another nurse that came and said that he had, they had pretty much done all that they could do. I'm screaming. I'm all the way on the West Coast. This is happening in the South. It was a lot. I had to fly home. I rushed and left work because I was at work. I had to fly home to Miami from LA. That was the longest flight of my life. I was crying the whole flight. I'm trying to cry without, drawing too much attention to me because I didn't want the attention. I wanted to be alone in that moment. And then I also started, like, the anxiety started at that moment, but I didn't really realize it at that time. I'm crying. Now I got this fear of, like, while I'm in the air. Mind you, I'm a travel nurse. I'm flying all over the world doing contracts. Not the world, but the United States, doing contracts, back and forth. Never had a fear of flying. But while I'm in the air and I'm crying and I'm going through it with my dad, while I'm going through this, thinking about my dad, I started to think, what if this plane crash? Now I'm getting like this fear about flying in my head. And I'm like, where is this coming from? But I was so overwhelmed with grief that I really didn't really focus on the fears that started creeping up in my head at the time. I get home. I get there late, maybe like 6 or 7 in the morning. I took a red eye. I get there like 6 or 7 in the morning. And then I go to the hospital. They take me downstairs to the morgue. I see my dad. And there was a sense of peace on him, over him. His face, his skin was clear. Like it was different. I felt that he was at peace because he had been going through a lot of health issues, which in turn gave me some peace. I'll talk a little bit more about how he got to that point because my dad was only 60 when he passed away. But that's for another video when we talk about like drugs and alcohol, which is all part of mental health. And I just, I felt a sense of peace. But then when I get home, I'm crying, family, friends are stopping by. I get a voicemail and I check my voice message, and the voice message was a message from my dad. That night, that day that he passed, he had been calling me. And on the voice message was a message of him basically moaning in pain. And he was trying to reach out to me, but I wasn't able to. He was trying to reach out to me and I wasn't able to get the call because in the hospital, the service isn't good. And the job that I had at the time required me to work in a basement with the security department and the transportation department. So I never got the call. So of course, when I heard that message, which was about 3 minutes long, and I sat there and listened to it, it was just him moaning in pain and calling my name. And I couldn't help but think that if I had gotten a call, I could have called the nurse and told the nurse to go check on him, be that family member that kind of push to get the nurses to go and do what they're supposed to do. Ultimately, my dad ended up passing away from sepsis. And I think it was just something that was missed from the nurse. I'm not blaming nurses because I know a lot of things happen. But I just felt I took on some guilt with that because I started to feel like, what if I got the call and I could have just went and called the nurse and say, hey, give him a little bit more attention, check his wound. He's in a lot of pain. If I could have done something differently, that would have potentially changed the outcome. Of course, I'm going to feel guilty about that. So that on top of the fears now that are in my head, and now I'm feeling guilty because I feel like I wasn't there in that moment. I wasn't there for my dad. And then my family, like I kind of went through this alone from my dad's side of the family. Nobody kind of reached out to me to kind of like, hey, you need any help with the funeral? Anything, like his sisters, his brothers, like nobody had reached out to me. And I was feeling alone. I was feeling like my dad had been such a good person to so many people. And nobody was like checking on his pride and joy, which was me, his daughter. And nobody was trying to help me with the funeral. But I thank God that I have really, really good friends that all stepped up and we got it done. But also I didn't mention that I was also studying for my EMP exam, which was, my dad passed October 26th. His funeral was November 9th, and my EMP exam was December 4th. So I could have postponed my test, but the test was actually changing to a different test on December 16th of 2019. I had been studying for the version that I was going to take on December 4th. So had I postponed it, I would have needed to review some new material for the new test. And I just was like, I don't want to do that. So right after my dad's funeral, boom, I fly back to LA. I'm back working and I'm back studying for my boards. I take my boards December 4th and I pass. Whew, what a load off. But mentally, I had been doing so much, burying my dad, dealing with the family issues, dealing with the guilt, studying for a test, still working, doing all of these things. No self-care, nothing to take care of me, just pushing through, which is a defense mechanism that a lot of people fall into when they dealing with stuff instead of actually dealing with it. So Thanksgiving comes, Christmas come, New Year come. Now we're in 2020. January 2020, all this stuff going on in the news. You know, China is on lockdown. All of this is like here now because China is on lockdown. We getting cases in New York. The president is talking about we're going into a pandemic. All of this is in your head. Like no matter how we push through life, these things are still in our head. They're still happening when everything's going on. All of this stuff is still happening. And all of this stuff is like sinking in our head. And no matter how we're pushing through life subconsciously, we're dealing with things. And sometimes it's not just subconscious. Consciously, we're dealing with things as well because everybody's scared. Like, what's this? Like, we got to wear a mask. People dying. People, dropping like flies in the hospital is how they saying it. And then I'm a nurse. I'm like, I'm about to have to go deal with this. I'm scared too. Like we wear masks. We deal with other respiratory diseases, but this one was different. They like people dropping, people, turning blue walking down the street. Like you don't even really feel all these other symptoms. You just turning blue. I'm like, okay, all of this is a lot that I'm dealing with and going through and still just pushing through life. I didn't go get a massage. I didn't do no meditation. I didn't journal to get anything out my head. I didn't do any of those things. And so towards the end of January, it's time for me to go back to LA for another contract. We not fully in the pandemic yet, but we definitely taking COVID measures. But we haven't started the lockdown and stuff yet. I get ready to go. No, I'm driving down the street. I'm preparing myself to go back, doing something with my daughter. And I'm in the car and I feel this like burning sensation in my stomach. And I'm like, what is this? It felt different. It felt like adrenaline running in my stomach. If I could explain it now, I couldn't explain it then, but that's what it felt like. Adrenaline running in my stomach. So I couldn't swallow. Like I'm trying to swallow and I couldn't. And that's what sent me into the panic because it felt like I couldn't swallow. And when you feel like you can't swallow, it's like you can't catch your breath. I called my cousin. I was like, go get my daughter from wherever I was going to get her from. And I drove myself to the emergency room. I get to the emergency room. My blood pressure is a little elevated, but now my friend is there with me. So I feel a little safe because I'm in a hospital and I got somebody with me. I go there, the doctor checked my blood pressure. It's just a little elevated, like 140 over something. But by the time I left, it was back normal. And the doctor basically diagnosed me and said that I had a panic attack. Recommended that I go see, a therapist. And that was it. So I go home. I feel better. A week goes by. I'm good. No symptoms. I remember Kobe passing or something. I'm good. Like I'm home. I'm thinking I'm like back to normal. I don't know what happened in that moment. And that's that. I get the night before I'm supposed to fly back to LA to start my contract. I can't sleep. I'm tossing and turning on the couch And boom, another panic attack come. I'm like, oh my God, it's happening again. What I realized, that I had started worrying about the flight. Remember that fear that I started experiencing on an airplane when I was flying home from my dad's death? That had manifested inside me as a fear, and subconsciously I'm thinking I'm about to go get on a flight, and now I'm scared of flying. So I'm like, this just don't make sense. So I'm pushing through again. I'm still pushing through. I'm like, I ain't scared of flying. I've been flying a long time. I'm pushing through. Panic attack passes because they usually only last, somewhere like right up under a minute. I'm pushing through. I get in the car, in the Uber, another panic attack. I'm like, oh my gosh. The whole flight, that was in the Uber, was the last panic attack I had. But the whole flight, I had a layover in North Carolina. I remember shaking and trembling. I remember crying. I'm like, what is happening to me? What in the world is going on with me? I get to LA. I start the contract. I tell another friend of mine was starting the contract with me. I tell her what's going on with me. I'm staying in the extended stay. I think in 14 days, I was eating somewhere around 200 calories a day because I didn't have an appetite. I think I may have slept in 14 days. I probably slept maybe 14 hours. I couldn't sleep. I was scared. I was having more panic attacks. I had horrible insomnia. And I had to leave the contract because I wasn't sleeping, and I just didn't feel safe that I was doing what I needed to do to take care of patients. I didn't want to jeopardize anybody else's safety because I just didn't know what was going on with me. So the day of my contract, the day that I decided I couldn't do the contract anymore, I told one of the nurses there who had been there a while, and we just kind of said hi, and bye. And that day, she passed me a Daily Bread, one of those little Daily Bread books. She passed me a Daily Bread. And I'm just reading through the Daily Bread, and I'm like, why today? And so she said, what is wrong with you? So I took her into the back, like, lounge area, because the back of the unit that we were working on wasn't being utilized. So I took her back there and I said, I've been having panic attacks and I don't know what's going on with me. And I'm a mental health nurse practitioner, and I just feel like, how can I take care of patients like this? Like, I'm worried about my future, and I'm worried about myself. I'm worried about everything. I just don't know. I can't work like this as a nurse. And the lady goes to me. She's this little Asian lady, and she says to me, anxiety is not of the Lord. Anxiety is not of the Lord. Like, literally. I'm like, yikes, like, ma'am, what are we, like, okay. And I'm like convicted at the same time. I felt, wow, I'm taking all these different approaches, because by then I'm like, Google, let me tell you about that Google when you're going through anxiety. It's like Mr. Hyde. When you read in Google going through anxiety, it makes everything worse. And that's where I went at, because I didn't know what was happening to me. I wanted to read other people's story. I wanted to read how other people heal. I wanted to read everything. And Google was my resource at the time to do it, instead of, going to the Lord with it. When that lady told me anxiety is not of the Lord, she told me a book to read that her pastor had written regarding anxiety. I brought it on audiobook and I started to listen to it. And that, I have to be 100% honest, that was the change in the trajectory of my healing from anxiety. I left the contract. I was so scared to be in LA alone. At the time, my cousin was a flight attendant. I had to ask her to come pick me up. When I say come pick me up, I mean fly to LA, come get me, so I have somebody to fly back with. Because I was with her, I have to say I didn't feel super anxious about the flight. But I flew back with her. We took all my things and I was home. Now by this time we in full blown COVID now. We going into full blown COVID. They talking about the lockdowns. New York having 700 to 800 deaths a day. This not helping me. This is not helping me. Now I do know anxiety is not of the Lord by now, but that wasn't helping because that took a process. So what ended up happening was I started reading more the Bible. I started going to the Bible. The Bible, like, I don't know exactly. I don't think the number is mentioned, like, for sure, but anxiety is mentioned in the Bible a lot, which kind of made me feel better because that made me feel like God knows that we are going to go through this because it's here. It's in the Bible. So I started using that as a resources. But let me tell you, when you're weak, I have always been mentally strong. Anxiety was my moment of weakness. And when I tell you the devil was coming after me left and right. So I found a therapist. The first therapist wasn't the best match for me. And the reason being is because after 2 sessions, she started talking about medications. I didn't want to take the medication. I was like, I'm a firm believer in therapy. That has always been a big thing for me. Prior to me having anxiety, I never had a therapist, but I'm a mental health nurse practitioner and I've always wanted to be real big on therapy. I know they want to push us to be big on medication management, but I'm big on therapy because I believe that therapy works. I've always believed in therapy. And now I can actually say as a testimony how therapy helped me. But my first therapist, we wasn't a good match because of the medication management. I didn't like that she just didn't want to do the work. And she's like, why don't we just give you this to help you through? No, why don't you just help me mentally through it? And then if I'm like after a month or 2, if I'm still in this bad space, maybe we could try some medication. Like, don't automatically just say, hey, here goes some meds. I've never been that way, even with medical stuff. Like, I'm very a supplement person, take my vitamins, take my minerals, use creams and stuff like that for pain or whatever instead of always, Tylenol. That's just me. So I found another therapist, which was referred to me by a friend. And after I told her everything that I had been going through, she was like, yeah, let's do it. She said, I think you could get through this without medication. So I'm going to therapy, started off with twice a week. We had only 2 sessions in person, and then we went on lockdown and we started doing it virtually, like FaceTime. Therapy was helping me big time deal with the fears. Everything I was telling her, she gave me homework. I did it. Exposure therapy. By this time, like I'm scared to drive, If I go drive, I was driving, but having panic while I was driving because somebody had to take my daughter to school and it was me. But I was panicking while driving. So she's like, you got to face that. So she would send me driving at night by myself. And honestly, when you face those fears, they start to go away. And that's what started happening with that. But I won't take away also, I was reading my Bible and I was praying to God. I wasn't praying to God to remove the anxiety from me, but I was praying to God to carry me through it because I had read that don't ask God to remove you so fast from your suffering because there may be lessons in it for you to learn. So I'm like, I want to learn the lessons, but I want you to make sure that you got me through this. And things started to get better. But let me tell you about the attacks from the devil during this time. I had been to the emergency room about 3 or 4 times with my anxiety once I got back home from LA because I just didn't know what was going on with me. I was feeling like my sugar was dropping. Like I would get so anxious that I felt like I was going to pass out. So that connection came with me eating food. So I had put myself on this little schedule. I was eating every 2 hours, and that was giving me comfort of that my sugar wasn't going to drop. But at nighttime, when I'm getting ready to go to sleep, I'm like, my sugar going to drop in the middle of my sleep. So I couldn't sleep because mentally I'm like, my sugar going to drop in my sleep and I might go into a diabetic coma. Me being an ICU nurse didn't help this whole situation. So I'm like, I can't go to sleep. So I'm not sleeping. I'm waking up. When I do fall or doze off, I'm jumping up, going to eat a banana or something because I'm thinking my sugar might be low. I was going through it. The devil, when I would close my eyes and try to go to sleep, I would literally be laying there. And as soon as I close my eyes, if I see bats, like black bats coming towards me, I knew that was the devil. And I had read, say Jesus, 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 and he will flee. And every time I would see those black bats, he fled. They would go away. It would just go away. I wouldn't see it anymore. One day my friend is coming to take me to therapy. She was driving me to therapy. I had a really great support system, you know. This was like when I was still like kind of scared of driving. She would come and drive me to therapy. And as she is coming down the street to pick me up, I could see her car coming. I see me getting in the car, and I see me opening the car door and just getting out, like while the car is moving. That was a suicidal ideation that the devil tried to put in my head. Never in my life have I ever thought about suicide. Never came close to anything thinking about taking my life. Never had any suicidal ideations. Never. It was a moment of weakness, and he tried to put it in my head. And I prayed that spirit off of me. I told him, you are a liar. I am not suicidal. I never had any suicidal ideation. And what I am going through right now will not be the start of me having suicidal ideations. I never had a suicidal ideation again after that. But I was under attack because I was in a moment of weakness. The devil was trying to attack my mind. And thank God that lady told me anxiety is not of the Lord, because if she hadn't told me that, I don't know if I would have directed my part of my healing towards the Bible. And I wrote a book. As I got better, it was on my heart to write a book about my experience with anxiety in the Bible. And I named the book Anxiety is Not of the Lord. And in the book, it's kind of like a devotion, and it tells something that I went through, and it gives a scripture that you can use if you're experiencing that same thing or something similar. But basically just to let you know that anything that you're experiencing with your anxiety or overwhelm or stress or anything like that, that you can go into the Bible and find some help with it. The book kind of just puts it together for you. So I'm in therapy. I'm doing my Bible. I'm doing my journaling. I'm waking up every morning right now, gratitude list. I'm facing my fears. I'm driving at night. I'm doing my homework. I'm healing. About 3 months from the beginning of the anxiety, of like the first panic attack, until like 3 months later, no more panic. No more panic attacks. No more anxiety. No more fear. I'm on a COVID contract. I'm making money. It's almost like it never happened. So I'm like, I never got to a point to actually be diagnosed with anxiety. I never met the time frame, which is 6 months. My process was about 3 months. I felt, honestly, and I still feel, that it was a spiritual attack to bring me closer to God, because that everything that happened to me brought me closer to God, and then the anxiety kind of went away. I still get anxious right now a little bit, but it's not like panic. It's kind of your normal anxiousness that you get, but not the type of anxiety that just holds me back from things. Anything like it's nowhere near what it was. I feel like it was a spiritual attack to bring me close to God, and it did. So where I'm at now is that I just want, I didn't know how I was going to be a mental health nurse practitioner. I didn't want to be a mental health nurse practitioner anymore, because I thought, honestly, I'm a patient. Like, how am I going to be treating somebody and I'm a patient? Like, that's how I was feeling. And God showed up and showed out and showed me, that anything could be done through him. And I won't take away therapy. Like, therapy is a really great tool that if you have the time and the resources to do the work, you can heal, your anxiety with therapy. You don't need the medication. I know anxiety and things could be very, very bad for different people. But I still think that if the work is done, if people have the time to put in the work, I think that they can get through it. Or you can get through with the combination. I don't personally think that nobody suffering from anxiety should just be on medication alone. I think it goes completely hand in hand with therapy. Anxiety is about taking control. Like, that's how you heal from anxiety. You have to take control of your thoughts, of everything, mainly your thoughts. Because if you don't take control of that, you spiral all around. That's what my therapist said to me. You're scared of driving at night, so guess what you got to do? You got to go drive at night. And that's what I did. I went and drove outside at night. When I tell you I was shaking like a leaf in the fall, I was shaking like a leaf in the fall. But I did it. And after a couple nights of doing it, it was like, you were scared? Like, I was driving like normal, like it never happened. By myself. I faced the fear. And I dealt with it. I just realized that I never told my story of my anxiety and my panic attacks. And I just said, you know what, let me tell my story about it. And I also wanted to bring attention to, like, I think everybody needs Jesus and therapy simultaneously. I mean, I could speak from my experience. It helped me a lot. I mean, without the two, I don't know where I would be at right now. So I'll put the link in the bottom of this video for Anxiety is Not of the Lord, but also therapy. We need therapy, people. We need to acknowledge what's happening with us. That yes, we are having anxiety. Yes, we're having a panic. Yes, we need to speak about it. We don't need to hold it in, because holding it in just makes it worse. 9 out of 10, that's why you end up with anxiety, because you're overwhelmed, you're stressed, and you're holding everything in. These brains inside of here, they can hold a lot, but they're not meant to just deal with so much negativity and stress and, overwhelming of thoughts and worry and fears. No, it don't work well with the body. All those negative thoughts and everything else, it starts showing up in the body in ways that we don't want. Stress is a silent killer. And anxiety is very stressful. So if you're someone suffering from anxiety, I definitely recommend you get you a therapist and don't just take medication. I will link a video of what to look for in a therapist. But that's my story. That's my story. Like, subscribe, turn on your notifications. Angel the Psych and Pete, build a mental demic. Ciao.